Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another episode of What's Up with Power. My name is Justin Wagner with Team ODZ. Happy to bring you this ride where we teach you the basics of power-based training so you can take your own training to the next level. Understand the principles, learn more so you can get your own results. We are happy to have Taylor Thomas from Thomas Endurance Coaching as our guest today. We will bring him on in a moment. We are in the pen in Zwift right now, waiting for our group ride to start. We've got some folks in there who are going to join us for a spin as we learn about what Taylor has to teach us today. I want to just give a quick shout out that we have launched a forum, and I will drop a link to that forum in the chat, or if somebody watching knows the link to the forum, if you can drop it in. We've been dropping in little insider pieces of information. We had a sneak peek to today's slides. We're available in the forum beforehand, as well as other interesting links and tips. So if you're interested in the show's content, want to just kind of keep a feel on what's going on, definitely check that out. So we have the group ride has started. I am going to bring Taylor on screen, which he is now, and I'm going to hand you the ball completely and let you go to town, Taylor.
All right, thanks, Justin. Thanks everybody for joining us. So I'm excited about today's topic. This is probably, well, it's not probably, it is my my favorite kind of application of power-based training. It's the reason that I think that training with power is so important, and it's because of our ability to manage performance through power-based metrics. So there's a fair amount to go through, so I'm gonna dive in and try to keep it tight. The forum would be a good place, like you mentioned, Justin, to come with questions if I don't get to everything, or obviously the Q&A afterwards. But anyway, I'll dive in. So the place to start, and I won't spend a tremendous amount of time on this. It's pretty dense, but it is worth understanding where this concept comes from. And ultimately, the concept of performance or managing performance with power comes from something called the impulse response model. So Dr. Eric Bannister, back in the mid-1970s, was attempting to mathematically represent the relationship between volume and intensity in regards to exercise, and ultimately the performance gains that come out of that relationship. So when you train at intensity and when you train at a certain volume, what is the response, and how can we essentially graph that or chart that? So his idea, or conceptually, the idea was that there's two opposing forces in exercise. There's a chronic force, which is the positive adaptations that occur through training, and then there's the acute forces, which are the negative things that occur in training. So we took this and he attempted to. We can see on the slide here, there's a very complex mathematical formula at the bottom. That's Eric Bannister's impulse response model, and so he plugged in numbers and a lot of different data points. And he attempted to chart the body's response to exercise. So there's a few drawbacks to the impulse response model. One is that it doesn't really take into account the physiological or some of the physiological changes that are occurring when the body undergoes exercise, specifically physiological adaptations with glycogen and with mitochondria. So there's a few big changes and that happen there, and there's some things that are going on individually between athletes that this model wasn't picking up on, and it had a great deal to do with the athlete's ability to continue to perform. So one drawback there, and then and it also assumed, because of the nature of the model, that fitness is linear, that it will always continue to go up and out, and an individual, if you continue to apply intensity and volume, that they will continue to get fit. Well, we know that is not the case, right? You don't continually train and continually get fit. There's times when fatigue pulls you back. There's times when you have to rest. And so we all know, if we look at our training over a given season or a year, that it's not an upward trending line the entire time. So big drawback there. And then lastly, because it was designed to be performed in a laboratory, it required a tremendous amount of data points, which was fine if you had the time and you had the energy and you had the resources to collect those data points. But for athletes that were trying to train and not trying to model their progress, this became a big issue. So impulse response model, good in theory, certainly laid the groundwork for a lot of the work that we're doing today and a lot of the ways that we track performance on an individual athlete basis, but not necessarily great in practice for kind of the everyday athlete. So next slide. So we fast forward to the performance management concept, which is really what we're kind of the meat of what we're talking about today. This was the concept that was that Hunter Allen and Dr. Andy Coggan came up with. Training and racing with a power meter is what this presentation is based on. And so the performance management concept was really just designed to be a more practical approach to the impulse response model. It was designed to be performed outside of a laboratory and designed to reduce the number of data points needed to appropriately or accurately predict what performance is going to look like when training and certain training stressors are applied. So there's three primary metrics that drive the performance management concept, and ultimately the performance management chart, the PMC, that we've talked a lot about on this show. We've also talked a great deal about the next three metrics that I'll mention, but I'll go into detail about what they are. Chronic training load, or CTL, measures how much an athlete has been training chronically. So if you remember, I mentioned in the impulse response model, there's the two forces. There's the acute and the chronic. Well, that carries over into the performance management concept. And the CTL is the chronic training load. So how much the athlete has been training historically. That is measured with an exponentially rolling daily TSS of a 42-day constant. So as an athlete trains through an extended period of time, CTL is exponentially weighted and continues to rise. So to that end, we know that you can't have fitness without fatigue. So that is the acute training load, or ATL. So ATL measures how much the athlete has been training recently, because fatigue is a much stronger force than fitness. So that's measured on a rolling 7-day constant. So that tells us in a much tighter period of time what's actually happening with essentially the last several training sessions that an athlete has undergone. And then at the end of all that, what we're really trying to get is TSB, training stress balance. So how much stress has the training that an athlete has undergone, how much stress is that put on their body, and how is that going to impact performance? TSB is simply chronic training load minus acute training load. And what it's designed to do is it's designed to reflect the form of an athlete, or what we often call race readiness or freshness. There's a lot of different ways to talk about it, but how ready are you, or how ready is an athlete to produce, say, a race day effort or a race winning effort? And we'll talk more about TSB, but the balance between training stress balance and fitness is really critical when we're looking to come into form. Next slide. All right, so we know kind of the basics or the groundwork with the impulse response model. We know the performance management concept and the three primary metrics that go into running the performance management concept. So now, how do we peak with power? How do we use it to to get our best efforts on the right day at the right time in the correct race. And so there's a lot of science behind this, and then this is also where kind of the art of training comes in as well. It's balancing these numbers, understanding what types of efforts are going to produce the right amount of fatigue with the correct amount of freshness on the right day. And so you have to find the right blend for you as an athlete. Too much fitness and not enough freshness, and there's going to be too much fatigue. So you're going to be too tired to produce the efforts that you want. Conversely, if you're worried about being too fatigued and you just take too much time off, well, then fitness drops too much, and you're also not able to produce the efforts that you're looking for. So you have to continually increase fitness without accruing or accumulating too much fatigue. And so that balance between fitness and freshness is critical. So, like I said, what we have to remember when we're looking at charting performance or managing performance with power is that fatigue is really driving everything. Our ability to handle fatigue and at what level we can continue to perform and still be in a fatigue state is what's driving our CTL. It's driving that chronic fitness. So we'll use the chart here on the slide, and I've highlighted two different areas just to give a visual representation of what I'm talking about. So this is two separate races in a season. These races are about 8 weeks apart. The first race, as we move from left to right, was a lower priority race, kind of a tune-up race for an athlete. So we can see that the yellow on the graph that kind of dives up, that's TSB, that's form. When that goes up, that's a positive TSB. That means that athlete is coming into form. We can see that the pink line is going down. So as form comes up, ATL or fatigue is coming down. That only makes sense. And then so what we want to focus on is kind of where all those lines can converge. The blue line is CTL, that's fitness. So the goal here was for an athlete to do a tune-up race. We wanted to maintain a fair degree of fitness. We didn't want to do a huge taper, but we wanted the athlete to be in some amount of form. We wanted to have TSB in an appropriate range for that athlete to feel good on race day. Now, what we want to look at overall is that as we continue to move from left to right to the second circle that I've highlighted, the blue line, CTL, continues to rise. So we didn't take a drop in fitness. We were actually able to continue to produce fitness over the next several weeks, so we didn't have to take a lot of time off after that tune-up race. And then the thing to recognize is that the yellow line on the second dot is much higher, and the pink line, the ATL, is much lower because we came into form at a much greater degree for that A priority race versus the tune-up race. So a little bit of bump in TSB on the first race, slight drop in ATL, but we continued to build fitness. And then if you look at the last dot there, or the last highlighted area, big gains in TSB, very positive. The athlete was in great form. CTL was at an all-time high for the season, and then afterwards we took time off. So you see that everything starts to drop down. So the athlete required rest after that effort. So just wanted to kind of highlight some of the visual or some of the ideas visually behind what managing all these numbers looks like. And of course, this chart that I'm using is the performance management chart in PMC in Training Peaks that we've talked a lot about. So we want to manage managing TSB. So like I said, it indicates freshness or form. This particular athlete that I referenced, we had historical data to know what TSB or what appropriate TSB ranges were for a low priority race and for a high priority race. So we understood how to manage those numbers, but that's different for everybody. Ultimately, a positive TSB indicates form, and a negative TSB represents some amount of fatigue. Now, you can operate within those ranges and still produce peak powers, but you have to know what number is right for you. So just like there's optimal TSB, there's optimal CTL and ATL. Traditionally, 100 to 150 TSS per day, so that's on a workout basis, is when an athlete feels like they're making the most progress. And then what that does is that drives CTL to increase 3 to 7 TSS per day. So that's what we call ramp rate. So that's how quickly fitness is increased over a particular training period. And then lastly, just to kind of reiterate the TSB range, -10 to +25, which I know is a big range, but that's why it's important to kind of find what works for you individually. But -10 to +25 is typically when we can expect to see peak powers for an athlete. A good rule of thumb is that the more anaerobic, the shorter that the effort is, the more kind of neuromuscular the effort is, the more positive TSB is required. If it's a longer, more steady state, kind of sub-threshold effort, we can expect potentially to see to be able to operate in a more negative TSB. So just some kind of guidelines there. All right, and then applying the concept. So I think every time I've given a presentation for What's Up with Power, I've talked about accuracy of the numbers. I think it's kind of becoming my my soapbox, but I'll mention it again. Accuracy. So ultimately, a correct and accurate FTP, functional threshold power, is critical when looking at these numbers. If FTP is off, then the power numbers are going to be off. Zones are going to be set incorrectly. TSS is going to be too high or too low for a given workout, and that's going to cascade down into improper CTL, ATL, and TSB readings. So accuracy, accuracy, accuracy can't be stressed enough. Also, training consistently with power. We want power readings and consistent numbers from as many workouts as possible. Now, of course, sometimes we lose power data. Sometimes we have tech glitches. Sometimes the battery dies in the middle of a ride, whatever it is. You can estimate TSS and estimate these numbers fairly accurately, especially if you've done it before. You can use heart rate data. Specifically, if it's a steady state effort, heart rate data is pretty solid. You can also estimate using intensity factor. So how hard do you think the effort was? And you can also look at historical efforts. So workouts that were similar to the one that you lost or don't have data for, that's a good place to start as well. So try to keep consistency in the numbers and have every workout reflecting TSS and IF so that you can produce these performance management concept pieces of data. So if you're new to power and you don't have any historical data or a tremendous amount of historical data, then you can seed the data. You can enter in some numbers to provide a starting place. Usually, the best way to do that is to make CTL and ATL the same, and that produces a TSB of 0. So basically, you're just kind of starting in the middle. You're assuming that you don't have a tremendous amount of fatigue built up, you don't have a tremendous amount of form built up, and that your fitness is in line with what you think it could be or should be based on the training that you've done or the training that you're about to embark on. So you can manually input those numbers to provide a starting place, and then you can always adjust them as you start to train if it seems like things are out of line. Tailoring the PMC. So the great thing about the performance management concept and ultimately the performance management chart is that you can tailor the metrics and those constants that I talked about. So you see here on the slide, we have a fitness CTL constant of 42. We have a fatigue or an ATL constant of 7. Remember, those are days. So based on how fast or slow you accumulate fatigue, how quickly you accumulate or gain fitness. Over time, you can start to understand your body, and you can begin to manually enter in these constants, and it changes your TSB, it changes your CTL, your ATL, and it starts to make your performance management chart look different. And it tailors that chart to your training and to how your body is adapting from a physiological perspective. So paying attention to how you feel like you're accruing fatigue, how it feels like you're gaining fitness are all very important things to pay attention to. And as you become more well-versed in managing these data points, you can go in and you can tailor the results. And then lastly, maintaining perspective, understanding that fitness is not it's not linear, like I said. It changes throughout the season. It changes based on goals. It changes based on training blocks. And so, like I said, that the art of training mixed with the science of training is really is really the key. And it's finding a blend there, specifically the blend that works for you, whether you're more heavy on the science side or you're more heavy on the art side, and applying some perspective to the PMC and this concept so that you get the best results possible. So I know there's a lot of information there. I'll kick it over to Justin, and we'll take it to questions and answer. And like I said, the forum afterwards is a good place to speak up as well if there's something I didn't touch on. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I am back on the screen. If you guys do have any questions that have come up, we will definitely answer them in the next 10 minutes here on the live stream. So if you let them fly in Facebook, also if you have them if you're on Discord, you can drop them in there. We will address your questions. I think a question some people may ask is, so what's the why is it important to make sure every workout I'm doing has power data with it? Like what's the crux there? What if I'm only wanting to use it on my specific tailored workouts, but on other stuff I just don't measure because it's not as important? What would you say to that?
Right. I mean, I think the biggest reason that you don't want to do that is because you have gaps in data, right? So the training with power is only as good as the athlete's ability to produce accurate and consistent data. So if you, for instance, do all of your dedicated workouts on a trainer Monday through Friday, and you're hitting very specific zones and you're getting great data, and then on the weekends you go out and you ride your bike and you don't have power on that bike, that is a tremendous amount proportionally. That's probably a great deal of time that we've lost that doesn't have accurate stress reading, right? So when we talk about TSS, training stress score, that's really what we're trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out how stressful a particular ride or workout was. And when we have big gaps in that data, we're not able to accurately understand how stressful a session was. We're not able to understand what types of adaptations we can expect from as a result of those sessions. So it's really important to have consistent data across the board, because if not, we really are just kind of shooting in the dark. We don't have we can't rely on the power data that we have because we have gaps elsewhere, and so we don't really understand what that's telling us. So if you're going to train with power across the board, because it really is only as good as your ability to track it for every session, or you can't rely on the data that you have.
Yeah, great answer. I think maybe the one thing I would add to that is, so why are those gaps a problem? Because think of the performance management chart as a digital coach of sorts. And if you don't tell it about a workout, it thinks you're resting. It thinks you're recovering. It thinks your fatigue is going down. When in actuality it's not. You're out there incurring more fatigue on the body. So it needs to know these things. Just like if you were to hire a coach, you need to keep him up to date on what you're doing so he or she can plan your workouts. Same thing with performance management chart. It's the whole objective there is it's helping you or your coach figure out how your body's trending. So that's why the gaps are important, right? You want it to know.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, especially if you were to go out and you were to train with nothing after you had been, again, as an example, after you'd been training with power all week, that would be a tremendous loss in data. And like you said, that would dramatically disrupt your ability to use tools like the performance management chart. One missed ride, specifically if it's something like a long ride on the weekends and 2 to 3 hours, if one ride like that isn't tracked, if it's just a gap in the metrics, that's going to really negatively impact and throw off your ability to use the PMC. And even to further that, I know a lot of people, they'll say, okay, well, I'll train with power indoors and then I'll just train with heart rate outdoors. We've talked about it before on the show, but heart rate is just not picking up. It's not an accurate representation of the training stress that's incurred on a workout. It doesn't pick up. It doesn't pick up the pace changes. It doesn't pick up a lot of those supra threshold efforts, so efforts above FTP. And so even if you have some heart rate TSS representation of that effort, it's going to be undervalued and it's not going to accurately reflect like I said, the stress and those physiological adaptations that we talked about.
Very good. So I think we just had a question in the game. Is that Hunter Allen in the group? Well, he's definitely on the live stream. So Hunter Allen is the author of the book we use for all of our content, actually. So we've always talked about training and racing with the power meter. So written by Hunter Allen and Andrew Coggin. So say hi to him, guys. Hopefully we can. Hopefully he'll be back a little more. Who knows? Maybe we can bring him on as a guest presenter, and we'll have Taylor drill him. We'll have ask him about consistency and accuracy.
Feel like Family Feud of cycling coaches or something.
Okay, we have a question here from Jeremy Werbelow. I probably mispronounced your name. I'm sorry, but I will relay the question. Do you factor TSS for weight/strength training days? And how would you calculate that stress number?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of talk kind of in the coaching community around how to accurately predict or assign TSS values to strength sessions. There's a couple of things going on. You can use heart rate, and you can get heart rate TSS specifically if it's like a HIIT session, high intensity interval training, some sort of higher intensity or more aerobically demanding strength session. Heart rate can do an okay job at capturing some of that stress. The real issue is that, as we all know, after you do a strength workout, it's not over, right? You feel the fatigue in your body muscularly for oftentimes days to come. Even if you're a seasoned athlete and you incorporate strength sessions into your work, into your training often. So the real issue is capturing that residual fatigue, and that's where heart rate TSS doesn't do a good job of kind of accurately weighting that strength session. I think heart rate TSS is a good place to start, and then you might add 10 to 15 TSS to the session to give it a little more weight. You'll have to experiment. Again, it depends on the type of session. If my athletes are doing like a heavy, this time of year for doing kind of max weight, low repetition, really kind of foundational strength work, That's going to be weighted differently than, like I said, more high intensity interval training, body weight work. So have to figure out kind of how your body responds to those sessions. But heart rate TSS is a good starting place. It's kind of the best tool, or one of the best tools that we have at the moment. And then I think there's value in weighting it a little more and using your best judgment to add manually some more TSS to that workout. And then to that end, taking all that into consideration, and when you schedule your workouts or when you write your training, knowing that there's going to be some residual fatigue. So you might not want to do a big VO2 session the next day if you've just had, a really, say, leg intensive day from a strength perspective the day before. So understanding how that fatigue impacts you individually. So yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of a nuanced answer and approach, but yeah, heart rate TSS is a good place to start.
Very good. Okay, so I've had a question here in the game from B Moore. I did private message to me. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to capture that because I'm not in Zwift mobile link, and unfortunately those messages go away. So I'm sorry if I missed that question. Maybe we can look back in my well, I'm not recording my Zwift game, so I don't know if we'll have that message to answer that question. So if you are sending questions, it's best to send them in the Facebook feed or on the forum or on Discord. The messages in game on Zwift get lost very quickly, so I apologize for that. But we are out of time for today. I want to thank Taylor for coming. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and hopefully we can get Hunter Allen coming back a little bit more. Love to have you present on the show, Hunter, if that's something you are interested in. If so, ping me and we can touch base on that. So anyway, with that, we will sign off. We're here every Wednesday, 6:30 a.m. Pacific. And if you haven't checked out the forum yet, it's discuss.endurancelab.fit. We'll drop a link in the chat, and any further questions you have, Taylor's in there, Nate's in there, I'm in there. We can answer your questions outside the show and give you some pointers and references there. So thank you so much again. Appreciate having you. I hope you have a wonderful and pure day.